Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service. And we have quite a few things to talk about because we've had some winter weather now impact the state, getting down all the way into southern portions of the state. And if you'd like additional information or any further details to some of the things I talk about in the show, you can go to weather.gov/Alaska and find it online. Well, we have early season snows that have occurred now across the southeast and into portions of the south central interior. As much as 4 to 7 inches of snow has been reported as of this morning. Areas 40-mile Gold Country, eastern Alaska range. Talk as of 7 o'clock this morning had over 5.5 inches of snow, and Eagle reported 4 inches of snow there this morning along the Alcan border, with additional snow falling today, so we'll have some updated totals come tomorrow. And generally, trace amounts to 3-4 inches of wet snow has fallen in the Copper River Basin. Well, we have the autumn equinox arriving tomorrow, Wednesday at 11:20 Alaska Daylight Time, and far from even any nice autumn weather. We've had very little of that. Compact area of low pressure will be moving across the southwest interior tonight into Wednesday morning, bringing some additional snow. I'll show you a winter weather advisory for that feature. And yet another Gulf low pressure system will be impacting the Gulf there Thursday into Friday, with gale to possibly storm force winds, and along with some heavier coastal rainfall and heavier snows in the coastal mountains. Well, as I mentioned, autumnal equinox occurs for the northern hemisphere tomorrow, Wednesday at 11:20 Alaska Daylight Time, and that's when we're at that point in the Earth's orbit where if you could be at the equator at local noon, the sun would be directly overhead. We're losing now about 5.5 minutes of daylight across the state as we go through this time of year. Eventually, that bottoms out once we get toward the winter solstice in the third week of December as we emerge into the darkness there. Let's take a look at where we have the hazardous weather. Winter weather advisory remains in effect until 10 p.m. this Tuesday evening for the Copper River Basin. As I mentioned, generally trace amounts to as much as 3 to 4 inches of wet snow has been reported there. Winter storm warnings for the eastern half of the Alaska range, including areas north there, northway on up toward Eagle, the 40-mile Goldfields, where snowfall amounts, some areas have picked up in excess of 6 inches of snow so far. And then we have a winter weather advisory tonight into Wednesday morning for portions of the southwest interior, including places like Anvik, Holy Cross, Russian Mission, and then down into Aniak and areas west of Sleet Mute. So there'll be some wet snows there accumulating, especially tonight and into early Wednesday morning. Taking a look at precipitation amounts, forecast for Wednesday, you'll see that little area of darker blue there in the southwest interior associated with this compact area of low pressure that's moving into the southwest interior. And then areas across the east along the Alcan border will finally let up. The snows there will become lighter, and generally just some lingering flurries during the day on Wednesday, and the rains also lightening along the coastal areas, especially through the Panhandle. But look on the right side of the screen there for Thursday, a whole nother round of rain will be moving in, especially from Kodiak, Seward, eastward. Areas from Seward eastward could pick up easily another inch or two, locally higher amounts in coastal mountains as we go through Thursday into early Friday. Pretty potent low pressure will be lifting up out of the northern Pacific up into the western and northwest Gulf, bottoming out right around 977 millibars at some point Thursday afternoon or early evening. So here on the satellite imagery, you continue to see the counterclockwise circulation there over the northern Gulf associated with the low now that is finally beginning to slowly weaken and fill. Still have a pretty good plume of moisture moving onshore there east of Haida Gwaii into British Columbia and Vancouver. Back out toward the west, you can see the enhanced clouds of the next low that's currently south of the central Aleutians. That'll be working its way northeastward and bypassing just south of the eastern Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula overnight tonight and during Wednesday morning. Back further north and west, we continue to see there is low pressure north there of the Arctic coast up in the Arctic Ocean. The circulation around that keeping colder northwesterly flow there along the northwestern Arctic coast with occasional snow showers and snow squalls. Here's the weather map. There's that low weakening beginning to fill now along the north central Gulf Coast with still snows reported across the southeast interior up along the Alcan border. And then a trough there with northwesterly flow across the northwest portion of the state bringing snow. Then that one little compact low that'll be moving across the southwest interior tonight, bringing wet accumulating snows to portions of the Yukon and lower Kuskokwim River basins. And then there's that low bypassing the eastern Aleutians and beginning to develop northeastward and passing just south of the Alaska Peninsula through the North Pacific on Wednesday into Wednesday afternoon. And by the time we get into Thursday, that low center will bottom out somewhere around 977, 978 millibars, bringing with it widespread moderate to some heavier rains, as well as even maybe potential for a rumble of thunder east of the low central in the north central Gulf, along with gale to possibly even lower end storm force winds. And low temperatures for Wednesday morning will generally get down into the mid 40s across the panhandle. Areas of the south central interior will see lows below freezing, especially as you get north of Anchorage. It could be down around 21 or so there at Glen Allen, McGrath, and Talkeetna at 26. Highs Wednesday afternoon, lower 50s there across much of the panhandle. Generally 40s across low 40s where there's been some snow. Otherwise, upper 40s, Anchorage, especially southward, and near 50 as you get down toward Homer and Kodiak. And then temperatures Thursday morning will get down back around or below freezing across the interior of south central areas, generally in the 40s across the panhandle. And then high temperatures Thursday afternoon as the next low slams ashore. We're looking for mid 40s to lower 50s, though it could get up to 61 there as you get on west of Ketchikan around Craig. And then further to the west, readings generally in the 40s from the Kenai down into Kodiak Island. Low temperatures will be below freezing, well down into the teens. Areas along the Brooks Range north of the Yukon River. Areas that have received snow will likely be coldest. Out toward the west coast of the Seward, lows generally around or just above freezing. And then temperatures Wednesday afternoon will generally only be in the 30s along the Yukon River. And as we go into Thursday morning, we could see some single digits again on the south slopes of the Brooks Range around Adigan and Anatuvik passes. Otherwise, readings generally below freezing in the 20s there along the Arctic coast, as well as up through the interior there of the Yukon Valley. And temperatures area-wide will generally only be in the 30s for highs, though you could see a few readings back up around or just above 40 there in the lower Yukon basin. And then for Wednesday morning, low temperatures there across the southwest interior will dip below freezing with that falling snow in portions of the lower Yukon and lower Kuskokwim basins. Lows otherwise in the 40s along the Aleutian chain. And then as we go through Wednesday afternoon, look for highs not much above 40 there across the southwest interior, including places there as you get up toward McGrath or Anavik. And then as we drop down along the Aleutian chain, highs only near 50. Cold Bay, and as you get further west. And Thursday morning, look for lows to generally be below freezing across the southwest interior, rising up into the lower to mid 40s along the tip of the Alaska Peninsula out into the Aleutians. And we'll take a quick check once we get by Thursday's highs, generally in the 40s across the region, though maybe up around 50 or so as you get out across the Aleutians, especially there around and west of Adak. So here's the temperature outlook. Nothing has really changed here as we go through the end of the month and start October. A bullseye of below normal temperatures centered over the southwest and south central part of the state, with precipitation anticipated to average a bit below normal, with above normal precipitation across the panhandle overall. I would not look for any warmer temperatures as a ridge of high pressure holds across portions of the northern Rockies and northern plains.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
We're going to now move right into aviation weather. And if you are planning a flight Wednesday into Thursday, main weather player is going to be an area of low pressure that's lifting out of the North Pacific, south of the Alaska Peninsula, on up into the northwest Gulf. as we go through Thursday afternoon and early evening. In fact, we could see the central pressure of this low bottom out below 980 millibars, around 977 millibars early on Thursday evening. And this is going to spread widespread areas of rain and windy conditions along much of the Gulf Coast, especially from Kodiak Island up along the Kenai, eastward into the Panhandle. And so anticipate impacts from that to aviation weather, along with those winds could also enhance turbulence along coastal areas here as we go through the next couple of days. But looking at Wednesday afternoon, still IFR conditions there up along the north slope and northwest coast, where there are occasional snow showers, snow squalls. Also a little area, compact area, low pressure bringing some accumulating snows will move across the lower Yukon Delta and then toward the Kuskokwim River and west of the Alaska Range in the southwest interior as we go through not just Tuesday night but into the day on Wednesday, and that will also have some IFR conditions. For Thursday morning, look for IFR conditions developing there in the central Gulf, still IFR along parts of the Elcan and especially back along the North Slope and northwest Arctic coast, with pockets there in the southwest interior and in the Seward Peninsula. And then for Thursday afternoon, we do anticipate rather widespread IFR conditions from around Portage Pass all the way eastward through Yakutat and the entire Panhandle, as there will be wind and heavier rains with low ceilings and visibilities as a result. Past conditions for Wednesday, generally IFR north of Anaktuvik, south of their MVFR, and then for the Adigan Pass, very much the same thing. IFR conditions will hold the north side as you fly out there through the north slope, with MVFR conditions along the south entrance. Areas further south and west, Lake Clark will see VFR become MVFR, and Merrill should generally have MVFR conditions during the day on Wednesday, as will Rainy Pass. And then Windy Pass should start out with IFR in the early morning becoming VFR. And look for Isabel to have MVFR conditions becoming VFR as we go through the day on Wednesday. Mentasta will start out with those IFR conditions, given the recent winter storm in that area, becoming MVFR as we go through the day on Wednesday. And Tanita, MVFR becoming VFR. And initially, ahead of the next approaching Gulf low, Portage on Wednesday should enjoy VFR conditions. And then over at Chilkoot and White, IFR will briefly become MVFR, but look for IFR conditions returning, especially as we get into the day on Thursday. So here are the freezing levels across the region. We've had the Arctic cold front, colder air push all the way across the mainland to the south. Freezing levels are down around 2,000 feet along the northern Gulf. And as we get out toward the tip of the southern part of the Panhandle, the freezing levels are 4,000 to 6,000 feet around Haida Gwaii, and generally around or just over 4,000 feet over the central eastern Aleutians. Best chance for some icing will be with that little weak low pressure feature, that compact system that moves across the southwest interior between 3,000 and 12,000 feet. In the far north, between 2,000 and 7,000 feet, with scattered snow showers and snow squalls. And then finally, down there across the North Pacific, entering up into the Gulf, an area of low pressure will be tracking northeastward, and there will be a potential for some considerable moderate icing in the heavier areas of precipitation and thicker cloud cover from 6,000 to 16,000 feet. At the jet stream level, 3,000 or 30,000 feet, we have a jet core out over British Columbia up to 160 knots from the northwest, and then ahead of it, where that low pressure is developing to the west in the northern Gulf, 145 knots southwest jet max there in the North Pacific, and then back out over the Bering. Northern Bering winds of 75 to 90 knots from the northwest and north. And then dropping down to 9,000 feet, we have the low pressure showing up there in the mid-level south of the Aleutian chain, and that one interior southwest low, with winds out ahead of it approaching the Gulf from the southwest at 75 to 80 knots. And then coming down to the 3,000 foot level, we do have that low pressure getting organized, and it'll be tracking to the northeast to just south and then east of Kodiak Island as we head through Wednesday night and early Thursday. Backside of that, rather brisk easterly, northeasterly wind flow developing. And the best chance of turbulence for Wednesday, a little pocket early on, surface to 6,000 feet, central Panhandle outer coast, and then surface to 4,000 feet along the Aleutian chain on up into the tip of the Alaska Peninsula.
So that Galena flood back in 2013 was at the intersection of weather and climate. Rick, I often get questions about the difference between weather and climate. How do you distinguish between the two?
Well, that's a really good question, John. One of the analogies that I like to use, the wardrobe analogy. So in my closet, in my dresser, I've got clothes appropriate for 90-degree weather and 50 below weather. That's the climate part of my wardrobe. But what I'm going to put on today, am I going to wear my Hawaiian shirt because it's going to be a hot July day, or am I going to wear my bunny boots because it's going to be 50 below? That's the weather part of my wardrobe.
You know, there's another interesting analogy. I've heard it said that climate is like your personality, whereas weather is like the mood you're in today. It's like that old John Denver song. Some days are diamonds and some days are stones. That's how weather works.
Of course, it's really a continuous range. Just as the Galena ice jam flooding was the result of a weather event, that ice jam, up against that cold spring, a climate event. So too with less impactful events. For instance, a daily record high temperature is a weather event, one day's high. But we put that in a climate context, say comparing to a century or more of individual temperatures on a given date.
So these extreme events like record high temperatures also happen on the seasonal time scale. Just in the last few years, we've had what was called a marine heat wave in the waters south of Alaska, the Gulf of Alaska and the Bering Sea. The water temperatures in that area set new records in 2015 and 2016.
And most Alaskans are acutely aware that big wildfire seasons are becoming more and more common, most recently in 2015. And the frequency of million-acre seasons has doubled since the early 1990s.
Just this past winter, we had another event in the Bering Sea. The ice extent in the Bering was lower than it had ever been in the last 150 years. That's about as far back as the good records go. There'd never been another year like this one in the Bering with so little sea ice. That had major impacts on the communities along the west coast and the northwest coast.
So, John, what have you been hearing from folks around town about these kind of climate extremes?
I've heard from a number of people who've been here a long time that winters just aren't what they used to be. The average temperatures are higher than they were back in the 1960s and 1970s, and we just don't get the extreme cold days, the days down in the minus 50s or even the minus 60s that we used to experience in Fairbanks back in the 1960s, 1970s, and even into the 1980s.
Well, and it's not just winter either. 2016 and 2017, the summers brought unusually muggy, humid weather to Fairbanks. We're not used to thinking of that in interior Alaska, but record high humidities during the summer months. As in the winter, we've had a significant increase in freezing rain events, since about 2000. So much so that DOT has changed their road treatment strategy, and now we have the school district building in winter rain days into the calendar. And of course, we all need good weather forecasts for these high impact weather events.
We know, though, that weather forecasts are sometimes wrong just 3 or 4 days in advance. So if these weather forecasts and the models they're based on can't pick up events like freezing rain 3 or 4 days ahead, how can we believe what they say about climate for the future?
Well, that's a really good question, John. And I think the important thing to remember is that parts of the system are predictable.
So climate models can't give you weather for particular days or even for particular months or years. They actually predict averages. These are averages over periods of a decade or two, or even averages over periods of several years. So they don't give us the month-to-month information that we might want. What are they telling us about the future, though?
Well, these climate models are telling us on the decades-long time frames that warmer winters are going to become more common. We're going to have more frequent, very low sea ice years with late freeze up and early meltout. And the same will be true on Alaskan rivers. We'll have more frequent seasons when freeze up is late and break up is early.
One of the other common threads in these climate model predictions is that heavy rain events and heavy snow events will become more common in the future. That's actually a prediction that the models make for mid-latitudes as well as for high latitudes in areas like Alaska. So we can expect the heavy downpours to become heavier and the heavy winter snows to become heavier than we've been used to. They're also predicting more frequent freezing rain events, getting back to what you talked about earlier. These events that might have happened just once every year or two in the past could actually end up happening several times in a winter in the future, according to the climate models.
And it is important to remember that even in a warming world, there are still going to be seasons and years that are colder than the average, but these cold seasons will become less and less common. So, John, maybe I don't need to have those bunny boots in my closet anymore?
Well, at least you won't need to wear them as often as you did in the past.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Well, welcome back, and we start out the marine weather with the sea ice edge, and we have plenty of open water again across the entire Arctic coast, northwest coast, lower Chukchi Sea, and we are at that point now. We're very close to the minimum ice. Now, likely, if it hasn't already happened, is going to occur here between now and the end of the month. So no big changes anticipated, though we have had colder temperatures. Snows set in there along the northwest and Arctic coast. So that will help to begin facilitate the early ice building. But more importantly, we have another low that's going to be impacting the Gulf as we go through the day Thursday, and that's going to bring some stormy weather, winds and some heavier coastal rains. Look for winds from the southeast and south, 15 to as high as 25 knots, the inner canals on Wednesday, with waves 4 to maybe as much as 6 feet. Along the outer coast there of the Gulf, we're looking for winds west, generally 25 to 30 knots, waves anywhere from 10 to 14 feet. As we head over toward the day on Thursday, we are going to see winds increase to as high as 45 knot gales with potential for easterly gales to 50 knots west of Yakutat. And inner waterways are going to see winds picking up upwards to 30 knots from the south-southeast with waves 4 to 5 feet, Lynn Canal, but to get down there toward Dixon Entrance, we are looking for waves building to around 13 feet with some 20-footers possible offshore there of Sitka, Gustavus, and Yakutat. Across south-central areas, winds will initially be northeast to east on Wednesday, generally 15 to 20 knots, waves 6 to 8 feet across the Gulf, and down as we go down through the lower end of Cook Inlet, we could see waves of 6 to 8 feet, only 2-footers in Prince William Sound. But then on Thursday, low pressure is going to lift and be positioned very close, just east of Kodiak, southeast of the Kenai. And we are looking for southeast to east storm force winds to 50 knots there along the north central Gulf Coast south of Cordova, and 40-knot north-northwest winds coming down the length of Cook Inlet on over to between Kodiak and the Kenai, with waves building as much as 14 to 17 feet. For Wednesday, look for east-northeast winds across Kodiak Island, as well as down along the length of the Alaska Peninsula, with waves of anywhere from around 5 to 8 feet Kodiak Island, building upwards to over 10 feet as you get south of Sand Point, 4 to 6 feet on the north side there through the Bering. And then as the low lifts up into the northwest Gulf, we're going to see winds turn around to the northwest across Kodiak Island as well as the Alaska Peninsula 40-knot gales there in the vicinity of Kodiak Island, waves anywhere from 14 to 16 feet. And on the Bering side, we're looking at 9 to 13 foot waves with northwest winds to 30 knots. The eastern Aleutians will see winds out of the northeast at 30 to as much as 40-knot gales, waves generally in the 12 to 17 foot range, less as you get west of Adak with northeasterly winds of 15 to 25 knots, waves near 10 feet. And then on Thursday, look for winds to come down across the region, generally out of the northwest to west there over the eastern Aleutians, and waves around 9 to 12 feet on the North Pacific side, and 8 to as high as 14 feet there north and east of Dutch Harbor to start the day. And then winds are certainly lighter back out through the western Aleutians west of Adak with waves generally 6 feet. Along the west coast, winds will generally be north-northeast, 25 to 30 knots with waves of 6 to 9 feet south of St. Lawrence, and north winds there 20 knots, 4-footers there at Norton Sound. And then on Thursday, winds will continue out of the north at around 20 to as high as 30 knots, and waves generally running 5 to 9 feet, the highest waves south of Nunavik Island and east of St. Paul and St. George. Across the Arctic coast, winds will be out of the west-northwest 20 to 25 knots, waves 4 or 5 feet, and generally northwest to north there in the lower Chukchi Sea through the Bering Strait with waves of 4 to 6 feet. And then on Thursday, winds generally with a westerly component to them, 15 knots along the Arctic coast, waves 3 to 4 feet, and winds a little more variable, 10 to 15 knots offshore or northerly across the lower Chukchi Sea with waves of 3 to 4 feet. And there is that low Wednesday afternoon. It'll be south of the Alaska Peninsula, and it will be lifting and deepening to about 978 millibars, producing widespread heavier coastal rains and gale force to low-end storm force winds as we head through the day on Thursday.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.